Please take roll.
Harrington,
Here.
Hoffman,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
Wason,
Here.
Pollock is no.
The agenda is before you, no additions or deletions, so a motion to approve would be in order.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Consent agenda. Anything on there you want to have some questions about first? Yes.
Just a quick clarification, the pay application for the Southwest Growth Area, it's supposed to be 81,000. It's what the application is. I just failed to ask you about that. It's not 289,000, correct? Sorry to zing you on that one.
Oh, that's all right.
I forgot to email you.
Let me just take a quick peek here. Bear with me.
No problem. Page 15.
Yep.
Yeah, it's 81. The 289 is the balance to finish.
Yeah. I figured the pay app is the document itself that's
It
going
is,
to go,
yeah,
so.
that's a good catch, though, thank you.
So what is the proper amount?
Proper amount is 81,652.20. $81,652. Excuse me, 50 cents.
Okay, thank you. Any other items on that? Motion to accept the agenda be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Now's the time for a public comment period for persons who may want to speak on something not on the agenda. Yes, sir, please come up, state your name, address, and this is your time.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good evening.
Well,
My name is Rodney Anderson. We reside at 1552 Deerfield Drive here in North Liberty. Like I said, I'll be very brief. Chapter 75, which covers all terrain vehicles and snowmobiles. Specifically, we're looking at 75 and 7, which include dirt bikes, toy dirt bikes. So some neighbors of ours have called the police department on my children, 12, 6, and 3, twice this summer. We're always with an adult. And just this past week, while operating our dirt bikes, we were told that if we operate them on public property and or in the street, that we would be cited. So on yesterday, I saw 2 young boys who were riding the same bikes that my children have. And of course, I reported it. We then went to our neighbors and told them the reason. And they said that they've had these bikes for 2 years, doing the exact same thing that my kids do with no problem. In fact, they also stated that the police ride past us often, riding them on public property. An ordinance should not apply to a subset of people. They should apply to all. I strongly suggest that there be a clarification of this ordinance, so my children, 12, 6, and 3, won't have to wonder why they are excluded from riding where everyone else can. And furthermore, why is this even a problem for toy dirt bikes? Why wasn't this ordinance met with urgency until yesterday when I decided to make that bold move? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, too.
Thanks, Friday.
Diane, can you shed any light on this, please?
Hello, everybody, and welcome, or thank you for having me. Yes, so we received a call last Wednesday of an individual with a child riding on Alexander Way on a, I think it was a small dirt bike or a mini bike. Officers responded and then found out what it was and was just advising them of the state code and the city code that cannot be operated on a public street and or a public sidewalk. Then it was, I believe, yesterday, there was another report in the same neighborhood area of kids operating on the dirt bikes, and so officers responded and was going to handle it the same way, but they did not actually see the kids operating the dirt bikes on public sidewalk or in the roadway. So then this morning, I actually reached out with Grant and asked if there's a way that we can review this and maybe look at it to see how we can either make an exception for toys, how we can do that, make that clear delineation for what we want to allow on, we pretty much know what we don't want to allow on the streets. It's the sidewalks that now are becoming more interesting. It was brought to our attention that these were e-bikes, and so we did a bunch more research into e-bikes. E-bikes is pretty new as of, I think it was July, and so we did our research into that, and of course, these don't classify in what an e-bike would be, since e-bikes have to have pedals. These are mini dirt bikes or off-road bikes, and they don't have pedals. So Grant and I were looking into it.
Grant?
Yeah, and so research is ongoing. I started this today, but the gist of it, from what I'm able to understand, is that our code considers these vehicles, that whether they're gasoline or electric powered, they're considered an off-road motorcycle under our code, which is a type of all-terrain vehicle or ATV. And so our code has a flat prohibition against ATVs and then off-road bikes, off-road motorcycles on public property. And so we're trying to figure out what the contours of that might look like. An e-bike is a pedal-powered bicycle that has a battery assist on it or a battery operation. It's broken into 3 different categories, and they max out at 20 miles an hour. For folks that can be ridden by people of any age. There's one that goes up to 28 miles an hour, and that you have to be 16 years of age in order to ride one of those under state code. And so there's a question of what do you want to make legal and illegal, and we're trying to figure out what would make sense, given that under state code, an e-bike is considered a bicycle, and per state law, can go anywhere a bicycle can. But that's not the case with an off-road motorcycle that might not actually be able to go as fast. And so we need to think about what the sensible thing to do there is. I don't have any proposed language for you tonight. But that's something that we want to consider. My understanding is that no citations have been issued. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So,
And it's very complaint-driven, especially when you see the small electric, I mean, there's parents that can drive while the kids are, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's out there. So it's very complaint-driven as we respond and educate folks on the law or the city code and move on.
Were the bikes that were being ridden, were they all electric? Were they gas-powered, the smaller ones, these bikes that you
I believe these were electric bikes, not
Electric.
the gas mini bike.
Any other questions for the parties involved?
Two questions. One, I'm going to start backwards. Grant, can you clarify, that's too loud. Grant, can you clarify where the scooters may fit in, and we don't have anyone wanting to have that commercial type of a business in North Liberty, but is that thought that we've had, and would this apply in any such way?
the question is, can I opine on scooters? And the answer is no, not off the cuff.
Okay.
I would want to give some thought to that and look at the relevant code sections. I can
Okay.
tell you all about the common law off the top of my head, but I can't quote you statutes without looking them up.
Okay. And my other question is for you, Chief, is you mentioned 2 interactions that the police department's had this week with 2 parties. Were they different parties, or were they the same party at both interactions?
I believe 2 different households, but some parties were involved, same parties.
They were the same people on the bikes, is what I'm asking, or were they different?
No,
different
a
people?
household member that knew that their kids got in trouble for it and then made the report on the other neighbor kids that were
I see.
out riding. So
I see.
it's kind of a trickle effect. If they can't do it, then why? I mean,
Right, I
it makes
gotcha.
sense. Then neighbors shouldn't be allowed to do it as well. So,
Gotcha. Okay.
so we'll respond and try to coordinate that.
So as it's written right now, with the police being caught, and if it was to pursue, go further and issue a citation or something, what does that look like?
So we would issue a city it'd be a city code, it would be to the adult or parent, it wouldn't be to a 5 or 3 or whatever year-old child. And it would end up going to our city attorney, and he would prosecute if he's so inclined. What we're really asking is for voluntary compliance because it was complaint-driven, but it just didn't, it hasn't continued.
I would just say this has been a challenge in cities nationwide. You brought up the scooters, that's always a topic at conferences on, they end up in lakes or they hurt someone going fast down the sidewalk. So I do think we need to be careful on what we allow. A couple years ago, Diane was telling me, and I remember seeing these, we had little, I call them, I suppose, like ninja bikes.
We called them pocket rockets, and that's
Yeah.
what they sold them as, and those were gas-powered mini bikes and
Yeah, I mean,
driven
just
by
little
unlicensed
boogers,
driver
but,
all over the road. And
People were on sidewalks and roads with those, and I can tell you, if you talk to the Bike Coalition or pedestrian advocates, there's concern about allowing those types of things on sidewalks or trails. And so I think we just need to be careful moving forward on what we decide makes sense. And a lot of that's dictated, I believe, by state code, but Grant will, I'm sure, provide us a thrilling report down the road.
So we'll let the research do its thing, and you bring it back to the folks to consider.
I'll do my very best.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan. Thanks for coming.
Kevin?
All right, thank you. Well, let's start with Ranshaw Way Phase 5. So this Sunday night is when the traffic's going to be shifted. It'll be shifted from the temporary pavement to the recently constructed Phase 2 pavement. That's going to happen about 9 p.m. And then at midnight, they're going to do the full closure between Hawkeye Drive and Fairview Lane. So Monday morning will be when that closure, everyone's going to see that closure. So as a reminder, there's 77 calendar days allowed for the closure in the contract. And there are incentive payments for the contractor up to $40,000 for early completion. It's $2,000 a day. So they could, if they get done 20 days early, I'm sure the city would be happy to write them a check for $40,000. And there's also disincentives at $2,000 a day for late completion, and there's no cap on that. So if they happen to be late, then it'd be $2,000 a day. The east half of Westwood has been closed, and that will be reopened by Sunday. On Monday, they'll start working on phases 3 and 4. 4 is the full closure, and then phase 3 is the west side of the roadway. And as a reminder, phase 3 also includes the trail, so that trail on the west side will also be closed within the project limit. And the corner at the old Casey's at Zeller, that's also part of phase 3, but the contractor said he's gonna leave that corner alone for as long as he can and do that corner at the very end of phase 3, so it's gonna remain open as a school crossing. It's a school route right now, so that'll remain as a crossing, at least for now. And what else do I have? And so the west half, the east half of Westwood is done, now they still have to do the west half. And that'll be closed, they're planning on the week of September 13th to close that half of the intersection. And 21 days will be allowed for that closure, and they're allowed, that one just has a $2,000 a day disincentive for late completion on that one. There was also a similar for the east side, and it looks like they're gonna make their deadline on that one to reopen it. Southwest Growth Utilities, we met with the contractor last week. They've been working on their punch list, and they do have a startup of the lift station scheduled for August 30th and 31st, and that'll also include city staff training. So it's getting closer. Rancho House Phase 2, that one, there were just a few minor things to complete, and the contractor said that they have finished their punch list, so we'll be verifying that in the very near future. Pool heater replacement project, construction has started on site, and there's really nothing significant to report at this time. City Hall, nothing major either. We have our schematic design submittal due to city staff on September 3rd. And the last thing I have, Centennial Park Loop Road, we had a pre-construction meeting with the contractor last week. That's All American Concrete. And they plan to mobilize and begin construction the week of Labor Day. And then their goal is to have the roadway paving completed yet this fall, which would be fantastic. I know Guy would be really excited. That way he can do some dormant seeding over the winter and hopefully have a good stand of grass in the spring. Technically, they have till May 6th as their substantial completion, but we're hopeful that it'll get done early, as long as we suddenly don't turn into a rainy season all of a sudden. But that's all I have tonight, unless you have questions.
Questions for Kevin?
So the detour for Renshaw Way will be Jones Boulevard? and-
Yeah, yep. Jones Boulevard and Front Street. So, we're anticipating Front Street to be very congested. You have a three-way stop that's already pretty busy. And then Jones Boulevard. So they're both going to be congested. It's not going to be fun. It's probably, especially that first week when people are finding out finding out how long things take and different times, and hopefully people start staggering their times a little bit and allowing more time for travel and finding alternate routes. But it's going to be a rough 3 months for people, and have to drive a little bit longer until that's done.
Ryan, is there a way we can work with the school district to get info pushed out through their Friday send homes with kids and things like that may help with some of that school traffic?
Sure, and I'd have to check with Nick, but we may have already done that. I know Michael's reached out to all the public safety, school bus operators, those folks. But yeah, I'll double check that.
Thank you.
Did we do anything for signage for the businesses?
Yeah, I think, but not individual names, right? It's just signage that says all businesses are open.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure we did something.
Okay. Anything else for Kevin? Okay, Ryan?
Yes, a couple things. Next week will be a busy week. We have union negotiations or discussions starting with the police department. So we'll start those discussions next week. I think as we move into those talks, the biggest challenge that we see specifically with police workforce is just a shortage of applicants and officers, and that's not a North Liberty issue, that's a nationwide issue. And what we're seeing is a lot of departments offering different incentives for hiring and retaining them. So I suspect that'll be something we'll talk about, but again, we'll keep the group posted, and most likely we'll have a closed session where we bring our labor attorneys down and visit with this group about what they're seeing. So, and then also next week, the university hospitals and clinics have their certificate of need hearing. That's on Tuesday, August 31st, and the mayor and I will be speaking at that hearing in support of the project. And so we look forward to having or to watching that process and hopefully see approval of the new UIHC facility. And then lastly, you all saw our new population number, 20,479. A couple stats for you. That's a 53% increase since the 2010 census. It's about a 12% increase since our special census was done in 16, 17. And it's significant for us from a road use tax standpoint. It's about $270,000 a year in additional road use tax revenues. So that will be a nice shot in the arm for that fund. And additional census data, we just got the population. Additional demographic data will be coming out a little bit later, we're told. That's what I have this evening.
Questions for Ryan?
My big question is have we looked at Dean's envelope yet?
I knew you'd ask. Yes, we have. I haven't talked to Dean yet. Maybe he's watching.
Need a drum roll here, or?
Dean's guess was 19,579. So he was 849 or something, somewhere in there, 882 off. So Dean, if you're watching, nice work. A little bit off, but not bad.
And if you're watching, you owe the council a steak dinner.
$3 maximum.
Anything else?
No, that's all. Thank
Any
you.
questions for Ryan? Okay. Mayor's report, probably the biggest item that was occurring was the issue from Iowa City's mandate and suggestions from persons all across the board locally about what are we going to do. I think that everyone should have seen the public statement that was issued, and that is currently my stance as of even today. And we'll be taking some direction from emergency management if things get that bad. So that's where we're at. Also, in regards, we've been preparing for the certificate of needs as far as our statements and things are concerned. There was a discussion today. We'll have another session Thursday afternoon, so this is probably going to be our last big pitch, I think, more than likely. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, Bowman Annexation. Want to give us a brief description of where the property is generally located?
Sure, it's on the east side of South Kansas Avenue, about a quarter mile north of West Forever Green Road.
About how many acres was that?
We're about 71 acres for
Okay.
the Bowman property.
Thank you. So now's the time for a public hearing regarding proposed annexation of Bowman property. Anyone present wishing to speak in regards to that possible action? Anyone present wishing to speak in regards to that action? Did we receive any communications, written or otherwise?
No.
If not, call the public hearing to a close. You have resolution number 2021-84, a resolution approving the annexation of certain property to the city of North Liberty, Iowa. Anyone wish to establish that resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Final questions, discussion? Please take roll.
Hoffman,
Aye.
Harrington,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Resolution passes 4 affirmative, none opposed, 1 absent. The next one is the Rarick Annexation. Give a brief overview, if you would, please.
Similar location. This one was a little tricky because the Bowman property actually surrounded this parcel, and so we can't create islands in the city that have unannexed land. So Mr. Heyer actually worked with the Raricks to seek voluntary annexation, which we received. There is, in this resolution, a tax increase deferral on the city taxes, which is sometimes normal when we do voluntary annexations.
Okay, now is the time for a public hearing regarding the proposed annexation of the Rarick property. Anyone present wishing to speak in regards to that action? Anyone present wishing to speak in regards to that action? Any written or oral communications?
None.
If none, call the public hearing to a close. You have resolution number 2021-85, a resolution approving annexation of certain property to the city of North Liberty, Iowa. Anyone wish to establish that resolution, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Final discussion or questions? Take roll, please.
Wason,
Aye.
Hoffman,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Harrington.
Aye.
That resolution passes 4 affirmative, none opposed, 1 absent. Next item is the Greenbelt Trail Subdivision Part 2. This is resolution number 2021-86, a resolution approving the developer's agreement for Greenbelt Trail Subdivision Part 2. Anyone wish to establish that resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion or questions? Take roll, please.
Smith,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Harrington,
Aye.
Hoffman.
Aye.
That resolution passes 4 affirmative, none opposed, and 1 absent. Next item that we have is the ARPA funding, and I think you were going to lead that off.
Yes, I can, and I will, I won't read you the memo that was included in the packet, but really what I was hoping to discuss tonight, or at least convey, is provide the city council a better understanding of what eligible projects or programs we could use this funding for. As I noted in the memo, I think the original number we saw was 2.7 million. Since that time, it's bumped up to 2.9 million. We've now received half of that money. We'll receive the other half in 12 plus or minus months. And then we have quite a bit of time to allocate this money. We have, and I'll define these terms here in a second, but we have until December of 2024 to allocate the funding, and then December of 2026 to actually spend the money. And that is the Department of Treasury's interpretation of the legislation that was passed. I linked a number of documents in my memo. I don't expect you to read them. They're painful and long, but they do provide some good information. And so you have in front of you, I think there's five categories, I'll say, that where we could use this funding. In some categories, it's pretty general. In others, it's more specific. For example, I'll use the water, sewer, broadband, just because there's specific examples in there on projects that would be eligible for this funding. But then when we talk about addressing negative economic impacts caused by the public health emergency, we could be creative there, or folks could be, entities could be creative. And part of this, part of what the county is doing right now is going out and surveying folks countywide on how they think, how our residents think this money should be spent. We don't have any information back from that yet. I have not been able to attend one of their meetings yet, but they have a few coming up in the future that will be attending. But really what this does tonight is I hope what this does is give you an idea of the direction we can go. And then I'm hoping that if you have questions or need further clarification on things, we can talk about that. If there's a direction you absolutely don't want to go, or absolutely want to go, we can start talking about that. I just don't want you to feel rushed with this because we don't need to be. But if you all have your minds made up, we can move forward as well. And given, as the mayor talked about just a little bit ago, given what is happening now with COVID picking back up, there may be other expenses down the road that we need to be prepared for as well. So I'll stop there and then hear from you folks.
Okay, we'll go ahead and deal with the 5 general areas first. Is there any clarification or questions in regards to those 5 areas that we need to tackle beforehand? Okay. I knew you guys were smart. Now, you saw some instances as far as where the money could be spent in particular areas and specific projects. Nothing cast in stone on that. It's certainly up for discussion. After that point, are there other things that you would definitely like to look at? Yeah, please.
So Mayor, I know we've kept very good track of expenditures citywide on COVID-related expenses, right? We needed to keep track of those. I would like to see that as we have these discussions. I know we already have that, it's just a matter of pulling that data from us. And then I also want to see what the county comes back with their report, and specifically if they're able, to pull North Liberty specific responses. Obviously, I'd be very interested in that. So those would be the two things I'd really like to see, up front as we start these discussions.
And if I could just make a comment on your first comment or question about
COVID expenses.
expenses. We can certainly, we have those documented, we can get that number, but we can't directly use this funding for that because there's a certain date, and I'd have to look on the FAQ to
Yeah,
find
there
out
is.
what that date is. Now, what we could do is we talk about replace lost public sector revenue. That number's generated from an equation in the rules, and it's in the memo here, it's $670,000 rounding up. We could use that to offset those expenses. Or really, that's kind of the money that could be used for, as I understand, there was almost anything. But, so I just wanted to make sure that was understood, that those
Yeah,
expenses.
I think what those are going to show is kind of where our focus was, where we were attentive, what the needs in the community were. I know there's probably going to be some things in there, like the nests and things that, that we assisted with in supporting, childcare and just things like that. So
Sure.
Yeah, there
for
were
me, it's going
instances
to
where
give me
we
an
were
idea.
reimbursed for
Yeah.
those expenses as well.
Yep.
That's a good point.
Yep.
Fair enough, thank you.
Other points? Yeah, please.
So I got some thoughts on that. So we have some of the money now, and this is designed to kind of help people get back on their feet. So I am not in favor of sitting on a whole bunch of money for 2 years. So I would like some idea that, so there's not an urgency in the sense that we have to have anything done, but there's an urgency that we should get something done. So I think that one of the things I would suggest is we work with the agencies already in the area that we work with already, and see what unmet needs that they have that we weren't able to help them with. They've lost some funding for other things, and see if we can't use some of that money to get some of these other agencies back to increase their service levels to what they think they need in the area. That's gonna directly help people fairly immediately. I'm thinking like the food pantry, and shelter, and the crisis center, community one. Those people that, we can do something. And I think maybe we kind of see how things shake out, but maybe we could even say, hey, this is much money we're gonna dedicate out of this first amount, and then, hey, what do you guys need? And come back and we do like almost a second round like we do during the budget time. And so we can get some stuff going fairly quickly. One of the other things that I have is, I know one of the thoughts was what we can do for affordable housing and decreasing the cost for everything. So some of the water department projects which need to be done will lead to an increase in water rates. And if we can use some of that money to, for those projects, that'll help keep your water rates down for a while, and that's gonna help everybody
Yeah.
in the greater scheme of things fairly soonly. And there was, just kind of off the top of my head, and I'm not sure if this qualifies or not, but, for affordable housing, some of the cost for housing is a developer cost for developing the land with the infrastructure. And some of that, maybe we can make a deal with them that you will, some of this, housing will be different housing costs or lower costs. And then we can maybe help a little bit with some of the infrastructure costs out of this money, because that would be, my understanding would be allowed, because that would be infrastructure. So if we were paying for it and not the developer, but make them say, hey, we'll appreciate that, and I'll dedicate some of these houses to whatever. So I am not particularly in favor of just direct payments to individuals, because it seems like the reporting requirements for that are very high. And just, when you have a 150-page document, of rules that has a 42-page frequently asked questions, you know it's complicated. And I think that I'd rather work with agencies who are already working with folks and let them kind of get the money where it needs to go instead of us just trying to willy-nilly give it to people.
And if I could just make one, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Just to
Yeah.
clarify on that, that's part of the county process, is they are talking with those agencies, because what we don't want to see happen, I think everyone agrees that we don't want to see a repetition of services or, money not, well, I think a repetition of service. We want to make sure we're being as efficient as possible. And so I think, to Brent's point, when we see some of those reports come back from the county, that will be helpful.
Right. And we can coordinate some of that because, there is a fair amount of money in the county and it may be.
Yes.
We take care of the food pantry, the county does something with something else, Iowa City does something, and it's
Yeah.
not specifically tied to Iowa City, but in our area, or Coralville or North Liberty.
He just basically answered my question, because that was my concern, like, definitely don't want to duplicate the funds or make sure that they're going where we can look at other gaps that we have here. And I also agree that I don't want to hold on to funds for 2 years when we know that there's urgency in helping people to get on their feet. So I think that's very important in getting that feedback from the county, specifically in regards to what North Liberty needs, because I know that there's a lot of focus on, like, well, what's happening in Iowa City. It just automatically assumes that it's the exact same here for North Liberty. And so just to get some feedback from people that's here and seeing what are their needs. Of course, there's going to be some similarities because this has impacted everyone. And so it would be very helpful to get that information, but also to make sure that we are focusing on some of those gaps that are there. Housing is one of those major things that we know everything is kind of double, triple, and very expensive. So in order for people to get back on their feet, we do need to look at some of those gaps. And I think that's something that we can do relatively quickly and not hold out for 2 years with that.
My thought process about this is, starting at the county level, do we know what the questions they're asking are, Ryan? And do we know how they're asking, what are they hoping to find out in these questions?
I don't know enough about it, Chris.
Okay.
I do know they're working with a professional facilitator at their meetings.
Okay.
And I know that they're working on a survey, a written survey or a computer-generated
Okay.
survey. But I just have not had an opportunity to, I exchanged voicemails with Lynette Jacoby, the social services director there, and they are, it's still early in the process, so I don't know that they have all the information just yet.
So would you be able to say whether or not they're kind of working from the same list here that you provided to us, that the Treasury has summarized for local governments, how we
Yes.
can use it? So they're using
Yeah.
those 5 categories as kind of the
Yeah,
building blocks
absolutely.
for their.
That's
okay.
all, everyone has the same rules, yep.
Okay, because as Rakisha just said, I would like to, and I think everybody would probably agree, and if you said this, I apologize if I missed it, it would be great to know what that feedback has been at the county level. And so if we then needed to create something internally to poll our residents that we might not otherwise, maybe shed some light in certain corners, that would be really helpful. It's kind of a daunting task right now to think about where to spend the money if we don't necessarily know where those needs are.
Sure.
I would agree with that. We may have to do on North Liberty only. The thing is that some of the surveys I've already heard have come back as been heavily skewed because of the particular groups and their actions that they're taking.
Yeah.
And we don't want to fall into that trap.
Yeah.
I also think when we depend on our local organizations, especially like the pantry, they get a lot of our residents there to know what some of those like urgent needs are. And so there is an opportunity